You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYPC.
WCYTV.
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. Well, if you're tuning in this evening, you're probably very well aware that Don Lemon has been arrested. He was arrested yesterday into this morning. There was all of these announcements and breaking. It was really funny watching everyone essentially just type the statement on social media in the political journalistic sphere. Don Lemon has been arrested, and then follow that by all of the insane craziness that you would expect. My personal submission was that Jennifer Welch's Botox was likely to curdle right off of her face. But we'll get to that in a minute because there was a bigger event that was planned today, a major, super huge, ultra large ice out protest in which you and a friend, if you had any of them, would take to the streets and stand there and yell. And then that's really it. So here's what we got from some of these today. These protests in Minneapolis, at least the coverage by CNN, is it's worth a giggle. The way that this is covered is definitely a fond sentiment for sure from an objective reporter, so to speak.
And so out here, Casey, as you were saying, we are seeing, thousands and thousands of people. We've been standing on the corner here for the past 10 minutes. This crowd has not let up. It's just continuous. It's really a sign here that the people in this community, the people in Minneapolis, the people in Minnesota are not letting up. Despite, Tom Homan, the border czar, telling us yesterday that there's a drawdown, these people here don't believe it. They are out here. They are saying they want ICE out completely. There has been...
I like the translation, by the way, there. They're chanting ICE out over and over, and he's like, one might surmise here from my journalistic pedigree, looking as though I have been wrapped and sponsored by Hefty, that they really want ICE out completely. And that's what we're seeing. Dude, just say, yeah, people are out here. There's a lot of them. They're mad. Back to you, Don. Not that difficult.
So much fear and frustration in this community, and you're seeing it by this response. I've covered many protests, especially in New York City, and I have to tell you, I've not seen a crowd like this before. It is 8 degrees out here. 8 degrees, it feels like 5, it is freezing, but nothing is stopping these people from coming out, holding these signs, coming together. You can see it. For several blocks.
I'm sorry. I really enjoy the way it's like, oh, wow, this is huge. It's big. It's going to change everything. And it changed relatively nothing. And I'm just leveling with you here. There was a bunch of marching. They marched over to the Whipple Building in Minneapolis, and they yelled. And then the National Guard of Minnesota showed up in their fancy neon green vests, and they were awkwardly kind of chased out by the people there, which is a very weird thing to see. The actual National Guardsmen of Minneapolis kind of walk towards everyone. Hey, what's going on here? How are things going? And then the Minneapolis National Guard is just like, yeah, I'm out of here. So there's a lot of yelling. And then we get to some banner carrying, some whistle blowing, and there's a definitive line of federal officers, and then a guy over in multicam. And then after the yelling intensifies, there's somebody with a Danish flag, of course, stand with Greenland. Finally, after the crowd gets large enough, the National Guard just hightails it at the crowd's largest point, which is not necessarily what you're supposed to do. Then, following this, we get to Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, there was a large crowd of people today that were going to march on a federal building to free Don Lemon because of his arrest. So again, originally it was the ICE out focus, and then everything changed. And according to officials in Los Angeles, they had no idea what to do as people started announcing they were going to march on the federal building. So you had LAPD screeching down the streets, preparing for what they expected was going to be a really huge march on the federal facility. And of course, nothing happened, and Don Lemon went to his hearing today. We're going to get to that here in just a couple of minutes. But back to the Minneapolis situation, I do find one thing particularly interesting, in fact, rather newsworthy in this instance. Whenever you have high, tense moments where people encourage everyone to get out among like-minded people and get angry, you have people who say rather foolish things. Now, if you're Don Lemon, you get out in front of people and you admit on camera to violating federal law. If you are a Minneapolis city councilwoman, you're Robin Wansley, then you admit openly to obstructing federal law enforcement, which is all kinds of illegal.
And we're protecting them against a federal agency that is illegitimate and trying to harm us.
Now, she's been rallied to go on, but right off the beginning, we are trying to obstruct federal law enforcement. She's saying, well, I don't believe it's legitimate. Okay, that means nothing. You got to have a little more than that. But again, she's been egged on. She's already admitted as an elected official in conspiracy to obstruct federal law enforcement in the United States, but she'll keep going.
This should not be. This should not be. And we have witnessed in the midst of our love for one another, our dynamic public love as Minnesotans.
Dynamic public love? Sounds like an indie band that played 2 sets and we never heard from again.
We have witnessed the federal government use yet another tool to try to get us in fear. They are trying to tell us that it is now a crime to film your neighbor being abducted.
Ah, here we go. So this is what everything boiled down to, is now they are suggesting that because Don Lemon was arrested, and also the independent journalist lady as well, who was also along for the ride, Georgia Fort, we'll get to her in a little bit. The argument that was brought forward by all of these people was that now the First Amendment is illegal in the United States. They're rounding up journalists. They're rounding up people for filming federal law enforcement. No, not even remotely close. But that doesn't stop certain people like Tim Walz from just losing his mind. Again, already under several federal investigations for his role in the massive billions of dollars in fraud in Minnesota. He's already under investigation federally for a series of conspiracies to defraud and then also to obstruct federal law enforcement. Now, he is out there suggesting, and when I mean out there, I mean in an article in The Atlantic today, in what must be one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, according to the Atlantic article, worries that the violence in his state could produce a national rupture. I mean, is this a Fort Sumter? He mused today in an interview in his office at the state capitol. And then they remind the audience reading the Atlantic article, that would be where the Confederate forces fired the first shots of the Civil War in 1861. And Tim Walz continues, it's a physical assault. Walz told me, it's an armed force that's assaulting, killing my constituents, my citizens. He let his question about Fort Sumter hang without an answer. That's a wild thing to say. That is a wild thing to say. Suggesting, again, people are already making the comparison that a lot of those on the left who are desperate to keep illegal immigrants in the United States without documentation, that are often abused by labor systems that don't pay them the same wages, don't afford the same things. They need their cheap labor. As Tony Evers, the governor of Wisconsin, says that the entire state economy is dependent on cheap slave labor. They're already being called the neo-Confederates. To get out there, though, in front of people and make the case that this might be your Fort Sumter moment, you don't have to say things like that. The President of the United States did respond to this later today, and I'd say rather appropriately.
On Minneapolis, Governor Tim Walz recently likened the conflict on the ground to Fort Sumter, sort of imply that this is the beginning of a civil war. Do you agree with that characterization? Do you feel like there's a civil war brewing in Minneapolis?
Well, does he know what Fort Sumter was, or do you think somebody wrote it out for him? No, this is, I was elected on law and order. I was elected on a strong border. We had a border that allowed 25 million people to come in. Many were murderers. They murdered people. We had 11,888 murderers. We had prisons, including Venezuela, but Venezuela opened its prisons. So did the Congo. The Congo in Africa opened its prisons and dumped people into our country.
The president continues for another minute and a half, and he says 2 things. He says, number one, he says, Has Tim Walz read any history at all? That's insane. Correct. Number two, you need to enforce federal law regarding immigration because it was a disaster and continues to be a disaster with those that got in, especially during the Obama and Biden administrations. Two of those things, the 2 out of 2, are correct. Radio crew, we have to send you to the commercial. We're going to continue on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Now, over from the president, now we get over to the anger and the outrage, which has now kind of left the illegal immigrants thing a little bit here. Now we're shifting over into full Don Lemon outrage mode. So first and foremost, you have this argument that you don't have to listen to federal law enforcement, that you can just do whatever you want. You can get in faces and put yourself between law enforcement and those that they're arresting. You can just ignore orders. You can disobey things. We're going to play a clip here in a little bit. There are people in Minnesota that are just openly walking past law enforcement like they are shopping at a place that used to have open shelves. Crazy, crazy stuff in that manner. Georgia Fort, who is the other independent journalist who went with Don Lemon to this agitation storming of the church. While she was federal officers were knocking on her door, coming to arrest her, she just went live on social media and then stood there on the stairs.
Yes. Okay.
So he's like, you need to come with us. We have a warrant. Administrative and judicial. It's time to go. Come on.
Okay, well, this is really scary. There's kids in the house. You guys have not been really friendly in the community. And to me, this seems a little, can I finish, sir? Can I finish?
Okay, so this continues on for another minute. She makes the case, that's a very weak case, it's really scary. I don't like it. That's not an argument legally. Just a fun fact there. I don't know what your poetry circle told you, but no. Number two, as much as I would love to say that an officer or a law enforcement agency's friendliness, like how much they appear to be the police departments from when you were watching Caillou and Out of the Box as a kid, I don't know what to tell you. In this particular circumstance, that has nothing to do with the fact that you violated federal law and they have a warrant for your arrest. You have kids in the house. Yeah, you should have thought of that. Individuals who commit crimes and then hide behind their children, like, oh, you have to leave me here. I have kids. Yeah, and you still chose to violate federal law. Now, we're going to get to a little more of this later. This Don Lemon arrest situation dominated every single aspect of the media today, including other events. For example, when Todd Blanche announced the Epstein file release, journalists were asking him, what is your reaction, Deputy Attorney General? What is your reaction to Don Lemon's arrest? And here was that.
Do you have a reaction to the arrest of Don Lemon overnight?
Do I have a reaction to what?
To Don Lemon's arrest overnight?
Do I have a reaction to it? I don't know what that means. What are you looking for me to do? Jump up and down? No, I don't have a reaction to it. I don't know that the charges are unsealed yet. So I can't. I'm not going to comment on that.
This became the entire narrative for the day. By the way, if you ever are in one of these social instances in which the political group of your choice says they're going to, move forward and they're going to get the pitchforks and they're going to march for you, then don't be surprised when they immediately, as soon as one of their buddies becomes the focal point, shift all of the media and attention away from the lesbian protests in Minneapolis. There's a lot of lesbian yelling today. And then that all the way over to Don Lemon, because he's their favorite lesbian. And so it was a really weird shift away from policy today. There were a lot of other there was like an agriculture press conference today where they were asked about Don Lemon as though they were going to start talking about growing lemons. It was just bizarre how quickly things shifted over to this particular thing. Now, I do very quickly, before we swing back to pick up the radio crew, I do want to mention there have been some nice super chats already tonight. A $5 one from Glenn Gardner, a $20 one from Pam Preston, a $20 one from Chris Garish. You guys don't have to do that. You don't need to give us any money. You're welcome to watch here for free. We're glad that you're here. Thank you very much. You don't have to do that. Speaking of things you didn't have to do, because I'm really good at segues, Jane Fonda emerged yet again, because I see one of the comments, user WD over in the comments asks, why are the lesbians yelling today? Because Jane Fonda hasn't had your attention for a really long time. And Don Lemon was the perfect springboard. Also, other famous lesbians in the United States, Brian Stelter, Ellie Mistel, George Conway. I mean, everyone came out in full force to yell and complain that the end of democracy was at hand. The Nazis are here. It's slavery, apparently. We're going to talk about it. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
So, what do you do when something happens that really pulls at your heartstrings politically and you are really passionate about getting out in front of people and talking about it? Maybe you make a social media post. Maybe if you're in the political sphere, you write an article. Maybe if you're, maybe you're like me, you call up friends and family who have that shared interest with you. And you yell about it. If Purdue has a really good or a bad game, I'm calling, my grandmother's a huge Purdue fan. I'm going to call her and talk about it. If there's something crazy that goes on regarding a story in Illinois, I've got a longtime friend from Illinois, call him and talk about it. But what you shouldn't get out there and do, if you're really passionate about the Don Lemon thing, is whatever this weird, bizarre Jane Fonda lesbian anger skit is. That is not an exaggeration. That is the best way that I can describe it. Behold.
I'm Jane Fonda.
And I'm Jane Fonda's internal lesbian anger.
Now, to be fair, often when I'm mad, I also consult my internal lesbian anger, as do we all. Normally, my outrage is the price of a Subaru Outback, just to be fair. But I want to hear where this is going.
Jane Fonda.
And I'm Jane Fonda's internal lesbian anger.
Dana, I'm not a lesbian.
There's still time, Jane. There's still time.
I've been fighting injustices like these for a very long time.
She's been fighting like this for years, everybody.
Oh, let's not go that far.
70? 70?
That's better.
She's been fighting like this for like 70 years, everybody.
So I'm here to remind you to exercise your First Amendment rights.
Fight for the Constitution,
Freedom of speech.
Speak the up.
Freedom of assembly.
Get your asses out on the street.
It's time to be brave and stand up.
So I guess the secret to being a lesbian and like an internal, like, Jiminy Cricket and drag or whatever, the real secret is that you just get way more obnoxious and then you swear a lot. So essentially, if you're a beat comic in the 90s, you're actually an internal conscience lesbian. Now, that's not all Jane Fonda did. When I brought her up, I wasn't just saying that was her only feature of the day. She then took to the streets. Here you go.
Don Lemon is a professional journalist. He and his producer were doing their job. Nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. We're going to break into those details because I'm already seeing every discount bargain bin Facebook lawyer make assumptions and assessments over this that have nothing at all to do with legal precedent at the state or the federal level whatsoever.
And he's been arrested, and they'll make up all kinds of defamatory things to say about him. That's what they're doing. This is how autocrats act.
Autocrats. Interesting.
We can't fall for it. We have to speak up. When a red line is crossed like this, we cannot be silent. And I want...
The one person in the crowd, oh, no one's cheering. Jeb Bush, please clap. Woo! Oh, wait, that's our cue. Woo! Yeah, we got to cross the speaking red line. Brian Stelter also, end of democracy. We're all going to die. It's the end of everything.
And you're going to see some people, on the MAGA right who are going to cheer this. At the same time, many First Amendment groups, many press freedom advocates are going to say this has a real chill because Lemon walked in, yes, with a microphone and a camera to document what happened at the church. Yeah. And frankly, I think viewers are better off for him having told us what happened in the church that day.
Oh, they're better off because of him going in there. Again, so the claim that is being made And I'm going to talk about this with Tyler O'Neill as our senior editor for the Daily Signal. He has been following this very closely. And one of the things that is right at the tip of the iceberg that was argued today in the very, very initial hearing for Don Lemon, he was released now back out into the public. So I'm sure that even now during this show, he will make some kind of very impassioned, tear-filled little selfie video. You know, God knows Adam Schiff and Chuck Schumer are. But in the meantime, the argument that Don Lemon is making is that there was just this group that was walking by in the distance, and he followed them, just like decided, whoa, there's a group going somewhere. I want to go somewhere. Maybe they'll take me to Funky Town. And then he follows them afar. And then they happen to walk into the church and he covers it. No. Nope. We'll dig into those details. But first, again, more of the getting out ahead of the skis. That's one take. So again, we've heard that it should enrage you as a lesbian. All right, good. Number one. Number two, it should have a chilling effect. And it was just spur of the moment journalism. Next, we have Ellie Mistel, MS Now's go-to guy whenever they want to talk racism. Because, you know, Don Lemon, I don't know if you knew this, dude's black. So if he's ever arrested, that means it's slavery.
It is an expression of white supremacy. And so when I look for constitutional justification for these arrests, it's obviously not in the Constitution. It's obviously not in the Constitution anymore. Because there was something in the original Constitution that would have allowed them to arrest a black journalist like Don Lemon. And that was called the Fugitive Slave Clause in Article 4 of the original Constitution, which allowed the government to reclaim escaped property should that property have successfully made it to a free state.
Okay. So first and foremost, there has never been a clause in the United States Constitution which says that if you're a journalist, you can break the law and do whatever you want, as long as, I guess at the time, you'd say, you can't arrest me. I have parchment and quill. I'm writing this down. Nope. And not even later. Like, you can't arrest me. I know I'm trespassing and murdering a guy right now, but I'm breaking this for a local radio. Like, no, you can't. Nowadays, you say, well, I have my phone. I'm recording it. So therefore, officer, it's not prostitution. It's just porn. Sorry, can't arrest me. No, that's not how it works. You don't just get to say, I'm journalisming, I'm documenting this for prosperity, and then get away with anything that you want. Mr. Monopoly's not going to hand you the get out of jail free card. Is not how that functions. But alas, that particular point that Ellie made did in fact become the backbone of a New Yorker article, because those poor fools don't have anything to write. And they're saying, well, there was another point in American history in which federal agents violently seized and deported people. They were called slave catchers. No, they weren't federal agents. They were not. Actually, they were pretty close to non-government organizations, like contracted groups and nonprofits. So, I mean, if you want to use that, hey, our current nonprofit and non-governmental organization program has a lot in common with slave catchers. Yeah, I'm for abolishing the NGO system, sure. But the idea that federal agents making arrests it's like slave catchers, no, not even close. This is the argument that you're going to roll with this. But alas, that's not it. We also have George Conway, who every single time we see him looks more and more and more as though he is morphing into the stereotypical, like really ugly, bald, fat dad and a wife beater from like every cartoon where the child has like a really rough life. The dad looks the same way. That's that same kind of, I'm talking about like the greasy wife beater. George Conway is slowly morphing into that individual. Here.
The arrest of Don Lemon is just another example of how the Trump administration is trying to turn the United States of America into a police state. It is the hallmark of authoritarianism for the government to try to suppress reporting about its corruption, reporting about its illegalities.
Okay, he's going to make the case that, well, what the Trump administration is trying to do, is that they're trying to stop reporters reporting on their illegalities. They were storming a church to harass a man they suspected of being a member of law enforcement. They didn't go in there to say, hey, I have this video of you assaulting somebody. Again, that's not an entire reason to assault an entire church. But if you were going to confront one guy on the street, say, hey, I have this video of you doing all this really gross stuff. You on a visual, is that you in this video? That would be one thing. But that's not even close here. We're 2 or 3 jumps removed from that. Incredible stuff. Radio crew, we're going to send you over to the commercial side of things. Live stream crew, we're going to stay right here and dig into this a little bit. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Now, no one is having a harder time. No one at all is having a harder time on this particular matter than Jake Tapper. Jake Tapper over at CNN has had a very, very long day. And the reason he's had a very, very long day is because he's covered this. Look, I got up this morning, I saw the news, and I tweeted about it because, I'm in politics. And then I went and had breakfast and got into a normal day. And yeah, I followed this stuff because it's my job, but I didn't hyper obsess over it like Smeagol looking at the One Ring. Tapper did that. So again, we're going to get into the details with Tyler O'Neill here in a minute or so. But Tapper is very, very upset that originally there was a magistrate judge in Minneapolis who said, I am not going to allow you to charge Don Lemon. And of course, that magistrate judge's wife is an assistant attorney general for Keith Ellison. There's some serious conflict of interest. But an appeals court and the Department of Justice said, okay, but we have all of the evidence here that Don Lemon has committed some crimes. You don't get to just say, well, I don't believe anything happened. That's not how being a magistrate works. That isn't just some magical swiping card to just do whatever you want. Ron Swanson in Parks and Recreation pulling out the permit that says I can do what I want. No, that's not how it works. And so the appeals court said, yeah, you can get a grand jury to go through this. And so a federal grand jury indicted Don Lemon. And Tapper got very upset about this. He said, well, actually, a magistrate judge wouldn't sign the arrest warrant. And so the DOJ appealed this, Tapper said, to a circuit judge, a Scalia clerk and Bush appointee. He said Don and his producer were not protesters at all. Instead, they were a journalist and his producer, and there's no evidence that those two engaged in any criminal behavior or conspired to do so. And so he says, well, then did the DOJ tell the grand jury different things in order to get them to indict? He makes the post. He's real smug. And then it turns out that actually it was a district judge, not a circuit judge. And then on top of that, the evidence in the affidavits presented to the magistrate and the district judge were based on 48 hours of investigative work. The grand jury heard the evidence collected not just over that 48 hours, but another 8 days after the affidavits were signed. So when you get out here and claim that, well, there's this other district judge that, by the way, is a procedural point, who said, in this one sliver of information, I find no crime, even though, again, Don Lemon was being asked over like a period of 8 or 9, 10 days. We'll get into some of the stuff that he's accused of because, again, he has been released. He wasn't going to be taken into criminal confinement. There are charges, put into those particular things. But now moving through and already trying to muddy the waters and suggesting, oh, well, Don Lemon is actually being charged for this. He's going to be thrown away. No, actually, it's really great. No, it's terrible. It's starting to create a really, really weird itch that it's going to look really awkward watching people scratch on live TV and in journalism for the next couple of weeks. Because this has really rankled a lot of people who just are under this assumption that if you're a journalist in the United States, you can break the law, do whatever you want, ride along with Hamas, throw a couple of grenades, participate in fraud, do some insider trading, lie about certain reports, manipulate presidential candidate interviews, and no one will say boo. That's not how it works. That's not what the law is set up to do. So, those things all said, I want to get into a bit of a conversation about this with our senior editor over at the Daily Signal and actually talk about what these charges really are. Well, following this particular case since the outset, and I mean a lot of information that hasn't even been released to kind of the broader public, is our very own Tyler O'Neill over at the Daily Signal, our senior editor. A lot of stuff regarding the individuals participating in this church agitation, storming, riot, whatever you want to call it. Tyler, Don Lemon being arrested. What's he being charged with?
Yeah, he's being charged with a violation of the FACE Act. That's the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, which apparently it's news to Attorney General Keith Ellison in the state of Minnesota. But it also protects churches and people for their First Amendment right of religious freedom, accessing a church. And then also he's being charged under the KKK Act, the Ku Klux Klan Act, with deprivation of rights. And in both of these cases, this involves the preventing of people from exercising their First Amendment right of free exercise of religion in this church.
So I know you've talked about the prevention of maybe expression of their First Amendment right to faith in this particular church. There are those online saying, oh, they just went in and they sat down very peacefully and quietly in the back of the church. And then once the service was over, then they stood up and they yelled a little bit, but that was it. According to your investigation, that's not true at all.
No, I mean, throughout the videos of the service, you can hear the church trying to play the music and returning to the regular order of service. So what ended up happening was the pastor was speaking with them. And at first, Nikema Armstrong and some of the others had sat down in the church. Then they started asking the pastor questions. And he at first engaged with them, but then eventually he realized that they were trying to make a political statement. Mm-hmm. And so he said, shame, and tried to tell them to leave the building, at which point they all got up and started chanting, ICE out, justice for Renee Good. And that's when the other agitators, really, I shouldn't call them protesters, came into the church. And that's where some of these other videos begin, where they're rushing in, they're chanting, they're blocking the aisles. So if you watch the video and you read through the charging document of the actual activity they were engaged in, these people come in, they block the aisles as parishioners decide, well, to heck with this. I came to worship God and this service is being taken over. I'm going to leave. Many of the parishioners weren't able to leave the church because these people were standing and blocking the aisles while they were chanting. Some of them were effectively surrounding worshipers and shouting in the faces of children. And this is something, you see it in some of the videos, but it's also clearly stated in the charging documents. The agent who was there and interviewing witnesses says, yes, this is what happened. And one of the most horrifying aspects of it to me is that you had parents who were leaving and they decided to go get their kids from Sunday school while they were leaving this now disrupted, taken over church service. Mm-hmm. And the agitators were standing in the hallways preventing people from getting to their children. And so I've seen many people responding on X when I posted this, that this is effectively kidnapping, that preventing the people from leaving in the middle of the service is effectively, false imprisonment. And meanwhile, you have Don Lemon particularly, he got up in front of the face of the pastor and was asking these very aggressive questions like, why don't you engage with these people? Why aren't you talking with these people?
Of course, Lemon is open that he went and talked to the pastor, but that's one of the things that he claims as a virtue for him in this case. He says, oh, this is me doing an act of journalisming. He's journalisming all over the place. He's so proud of himself. But he refutes and, in fact, outright denies that he had any knowledge of where the protest was going. He was just following. He saw people in the distance walking along, and he said, hey, what do you guys what's going on? And then the one guy said, do you hear what I hear? And he followed the Eastern Star with them. And that's, of course, not true, because additional footage shows Don Lemon before the protest starting, when they're in a totally different location, admitting he knows where they're going. And then another piece of footage that he's since deleted showing the church before the protest even happened. And then after the service, he's taunting children who are leaving the church service and saying they deserve to feel uncomfortable. How does he wiggle out of that?
I don't know how he wiggles out of it, to be honest. I'd be very curious to see what his case in court is, because yes, if you're a journalist and you're covering a public event, sure, it's one thing. But as the lawyers for the church were telling me, being a journalist doesn't give you a press pass to invade a church service. You don't have a press pass to disrupt a service. You don't have a press pass to go in and trespass when you're not welcome in a place. So, I can claim I'm a journalist all I want. That doesn't justify if I wanted to break into somebody's house and film them in something that's not supposed to be public. And similarly here, as a journalist, you can come in and join the congregation, but you shouldn't be up there disrupting the situation situation, and you certainly shouldn't be harassing kids as they leave the establishment. I mean, what we know here was that Don Lemon met up with Nikema Armstrong before the event. He went to the staging area with them where he interviewed her, and then they went to the church. And from that second video of his, you could see that he was outside the church knowing that they were going to be engaging in this church. And then he comes in, and in the middle of service, you know, he's going up to the pastor and asking these questions and getting in his face. And this is not a classic act of journalism here. Now, you know, he can claim if he wants to that he's a journalist and that everything he was trying to do was journalism, but I don't think it's going to hold up when you look at all the evidence of what he was actually doing.
So that's what we're going to dive into now, because Jake Tapper and other individuals out there in the journalism sphere, they're out there claiming that this is a warning that the MAGA country crowd is coming for all Jussie Smollett journalists, and that actually all of the judges resolutely stood up and said, "I'm Spartacus, don't do this." So we're going to cover that. I know. I'm excited to see where this goes. Tyler, thanks for following this. We appreciate you're getting, again, some of the perspectives. No one seems to care what the actual victims of this attack are saying, which is astounding to me. You haven't seen any major network interviews with those who are parishioners in the church. So thank you for keeping an eye on this. We really appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about we've got so much other news to cover. We have the California fraud situation and Gavin Newsom filing a racism lawsuit, I guess. We have the United States and Iran situation. We've got more, of course, on J.B. Pritzker, Kathy Griffin. We've got some important stuff. Bernie Sanders shouting at the Senate. Okay, but I want to make two things clear, because there were a couple of comments in the chat on the YouTube and Rumble live streams, which I keep an eye on during the show. Maybe I'm not supposed to, I don't care. And one of them said, what is most egregious about this entire event is the children who were terrified, who believed that their parents might be killed by these individuals going into this church and screaming. Now you can say, oh, that's nonsense. There's no reason to believe that. First of all, guess what? Children believe that major shocking events will result in fight or flight. Children and their emotion systems do in fact perceive threats as pure, real, ultimate threats. Number two, as we have seen consistently in Minneapolis, there are individuals who violently walk into churches and shoot everyone for left-wing causes. And it is absolutely justified for children who were prevented from making contact with their parents, who we saw crying. And the reason I did a show on this entire event after it first broke is, as I read more and more and more, my blood boiled, and it still does. There are some friends of mine on the right now, friends of mine who are over at Mediaite, National Review, who are doing the, well, let's not get too hasty kind of a game right now. And I'm gonna level with you. It pisses me off. I don't know if prosecuting Don Lemon is the right thing. After all, it could backfire. No, the idea that children are now being offered up, well, I shouldn't say now because they have been in schools for some time, children being used as props. Not props, just parents bringing their kids alongside them to protest, but children as props to make cry and uncomfortable. Don Lemon gloated openly on camera that children were uncomfortable because of that protest, said it was a good thing, it was beneficial. The idea the left gets to say that's okay, that as long as it's journalism and it's like alongside that political goal, then they can go terrify kids? No, I don't care. Absolutely not. When I say I don't care, I don't care about any political blowback of Don Lemon. Oh no, what if it Jimmy Kimmel? I don't care. Children were terrified and hurt. Damages have been done in the legal definitions. Go after him. And when you're done going after him, every single person that was at, not that protest, but that intimidation racial rally needs to be locked up in the same way that others who have been journalisming have been locked up for other instances and particulars. Radio crew are going to send you over to the commercial and continue on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Again, I wasn't joking or exaggerating when I said Don Lemon was bragging about terrified children.
Watch this guy here, look, he's hugging his kid. And, you know, I imagine it's uncomfortable and traumatic for the people here. But again, careful, it's very slippery right here. Yeah. It's uncomfortable and traumatic for the people here, but that's what really, careful, please, really slippery. Not kidding. That's what protesting is about. And so.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Protesting is not about terrifying children, you sick piece of garbage. And by the way, every single part of every video that he is in is laced with that. There's no journalism happening there. You say, Tony, how do you know that? Because I understand that when I go out on assignment and I am in very tense situations in which law enforcement is around and emotions are high, you have to follow the law. And you do have to follow the law specifically. Again, please don't take my word for it. Instead, take my word for it. DNC 2024 in Chicago.
So in case you thought I was joking when I said that this group of protesters was acting like a bunch of children, the protest has now, I guess, ended, or the march has ended at a local playground. And I kid you not, I want to make sure this is clear. They are climbing the playground equipment.
And I just cover what's going on there. Now, I don't participate in the vandalism. I didn't participate, actually, just, fun fact here. So that's the park where a few minutes later, right over behind that crowd, they would break through the perimeter fence at the DNC. I wasn't in there going, yeah, bolt cutter, because, again, politically, do I like that, my fan of the Democrats? No. Is that an excuse to go breaking laws? No. Oh, hey, pass the bolt cutters and also my selfie stick. No, not a thing. Now, on the furthest to insanity side of all of this, Kathy Griffin has returned. The worst guest ever to be brought on Whose Line Is It Anyway? The good one, not the new host who's awful at things, but the good one with Drew Carey. Kathy Griffin, who held the bloody Trump head. On yesterday's show, I played some footage of a satirist and tried to keep a very straight face as he pretended to be a left-wing person going around and documenting the political views of people in the neighborhood. And I had made that as, again, a satirical point. Whereas now you have the next day, people like Kathy Griffin saying, yeah, you should probably start making a list of all people who are Republicans and MAGA. You should probably write their names down and their information to turn over to officials.
Those of you that are awake, that see what's going on, what do you think the solution is? I think the murder of Renee Good, the murder of Alex Preddy, putting children on planes and taking them to detention centers, which are really concentration camps. Call it what it is.
They're not.
Concentration camps in the United States of America in 2026. So take that in, and I know you don't want to participate in something radical. I don't either. I wish I could just go on the road and do my funny stories about celebrities or making fun of politicians, but not even have to acknowledge this. But it is happening all around you. It's happening around you.
We're going to have to leave her for a moment. We got to bring the radio crew back one more time. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Those of you that are awake, that see what's going on.
So Kathy Griffin, again, making the same case that a lot of people are making. So many people calling federal law enforcement the Gestapo, saying, oh, they're putting people in concentration camps and they're killing children. If you really believed that, if you, as a person, right here, right now, you really, truly, deeply believe that there is actual, genuine Nazi stuff going on, and there are real concentration camps in the United States, and all you're doing is tweeting about it or marching, you're a coward and an awful person. And by the way, they're very well aware of this because their goal for you is to then go out to violently attempt to wrest control of things and get shot so they can use you as a martyr after they touch up your appearance so they can put you on the news. Now, again, you'll have people like J.B. Pritzker, who, because he's not going to go out himself and protest. No. I mean, he can't really fit through, most traffic light poles and intersections that, but he's going to stand in solidarity.
I want everyone at the Ice Out protest to know I stand with you in solidarity, and every single day. We need ICE out of our cities, frankly, out of our states, and Donald Trump needs to take his men and go home because they're interfering with everybody's lives. They're shooting people in the face. They're making life miserable for Americans all across this country.
Again, making the case, they're really awful and bad and terrible. Pritzker's administration let violent, criminal, illegal aliens, and again, we have full documentation in triplicate of this, left-wing, right-wing sources, official state of Illinois documents. His administration let them back out onto the streets so that ICE could not catch them. Who's that hurting? Everyone around them, everyone that those criminals come into contact with. Now, again, there are a couple of really interesting things. Again, when you encourage people that they are on an idealistic crusade and that it's now do or die, they will just simply ignore any common sense and reason. I said earlier in the show that in Minneapolis, they're just ignoring all law enforcement now. Here they are storming a Target because, of course, and local law enforcement, Minneapolis police, Minnesota State Patrol is like, guys, stop. And they're just ignoring them, walking right past, because once you give people the key, they're going to take it and run. So you can see as he's talking to him, and again, trying to do this reasonable explanation stuff, people just start filing in past him and they just start walking right into the store. Don't care if the cops say anything at all. Nope. Just go right on ahead. And then they'll turn around and they'll be shocked whenever someone gets in a violent altercation with law enforcement and then ends up dead because things go south. How could that happen? Oh man, I was only playing in traffic. Wow, what are the possible? Who could have foreseen this coming? Now, I should point out a little bit on the Senate side of things because yesterday I had a very annoying flip up that we believed the Senate was not going to pass the shutdown aversion, the packages that were presented. And then right before the show went on air yesterday, Senate Democrats announced that they'd made a deal. And then they announced later in the evening, no, there was no deal. And then there was a deal again. And now we have Bernie Sanders on the Senate floor. He's very mad. And he says, do not fund ICE, fund Medicaid, ice cream, and AOC's tight jeans. Bernie Sanders, go.
Series of enormous crises. Our healthcare system basically collapsing despite the huge amount of money we spend on it.
Bernie Sanders voted in favor of Obamacare, told me it was very good. It was a great step toward the future.
Millions of Americans cannot afford housing. 800,000 people are homeless. We have massive levels of income and wealth inequality. People on top have never, ever have done as well as they're doing right now.
So that's a very interesting socialist case. You will never hear him saying, so the wealth disparity thing, he'll say people at the top are doing better than they ever have. You know who's also doing better than they ever have? People at the bottom. The United States as a whole has moved better to greater things on every single metric. In healthcare and infrastructure and housing and access to resources and the safety of those resources and the procurement of needs and the procurement of disparate goods in the access to entertainment and the access to rest and relaxation. All of those different factors of the economy and of well-being and welfare are at a better point now than they ever have been in history for the richest and for the poorest. But he's going to get up there and he goes on for like 6-7 minutes that what we need to do, I am putting in an amendment to fully socialize the healthcare and completely disband ICE. Disband everything. I'm just that kind of drivel. And the Senate promptly says, no. So we've got a fancy vote here. The Sanders amendment to the Consolidated Appropriations Act. Nope, that's a 51-50. How about no? So best of luck to Bernie Sanders. Nice try, I suppose. We're going to have to see whether or not the government actually brings things through for averting the shutdown on Saturday. I have my doubts. So on Capitol Hill, the other side of things today, The Department of Justice announced that in compliance with the Epstein files release bill that was passed, Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, announced that it was time to release some more of the Epstein files.
Today, we are producing more than 3 million pages, including more than 2,000 videos and 180,000 images. In total, that means that the department produced approximately 3.5 million pages in compliance with the Act. Just a quick note about the videos and images. The 2,000 videos and 180,000 images are not all videos and images taken by Mr. Epstein or someone around him. They include large quantities of commercial pornography and images that were seized from Epstein's devices, but which he did not take or that someone around him did not take. Some of the videos, though, and some of the images do appear to be taken by Mr. Epstein or by others around him.
So this is a massive, massive file dump. Sorry to the radio crew. We have to send you guys away for the broadcast hour. We're going to continue on the live stream. Y'all on the Spectrum side have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you back here Monday. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. So the Epstein file dump. It is essentially broken into two parts. Number one, the remaining evidence that contains things that hurt the victims or would hurt them to be revealed in these things, the actual porn and the compromising positions and things like that. And then number two, all of the anonymous and not anonymous reports. So what's left? Well, the bad stuff that he had. And then also the anonymous tips and donations and like a few things like, oh, I like the Candace Owens style investigatory stuff. I heard last night in a dream, Jeffrey Epstein and Mickey Mouse, oh boy, like that kind of stuff. That's what a lot of this is. Now, what's really interesting right now on the social media sphere, let me save you a lot of time, but still encourage you to go read through certain things. There is a lot, and I mean a lot of people that essentially are posting things that are spreadsheets with like a lot of bright yellow on them. And in the bright yellow sections, there are complaints. Then in like a right column, there are notable names. And then there is another column, a section that explains why this was or was not used by federal investigators. And I mean everything is in these complaints because it's all of the complaints ever, all of them. And so we're getting things that are alleging that like Jeffrey Epstein is secretly like the Queen of France, all this other like, oh, well, Jeffrey Epstein. Well, actually in one series, Epstein was totally controlling Donald Trump through Israel. So there are several accounts that are running this. Here's the catch, though. In a lot of these really big ground shell, it's just the complaint section, anyone, and they did, file random complaints throughout his entire time in his disgusting life. A lot of them since it was publicly known that he was a predator. The FBI or the DOJ as a whole, several investigatory agencies wrote things like this, quote, complainant claims to have videos of high-profile sex parties, dealings with cartels, and having witnessed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We did not move forward with this because upon further investigation, the individual had been admitted into a psychiatric ward 3 times over the last 2 years. So actual crazy people are calling it, like, we looked into this person, and this person has lied to law enforcement like 12 times in the last year and a half. No, I'm not moving forward with it. Or this person, we asked them where they got their information from, and they're like, God gave it to me in a dream. That kind of stuff. And that's really what a lot of this is. Now, there are a few last kind of straggling communiques and information. Now, the people involved in, like the survivors of the Epstein files and things, they're out. They're unhappy. They're issuing some complaint about this. Here, that is.
Look, I am glad that documents.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That's not an actual survivor. That's Ro Khanna of California, who, remember I told you about Democrats like shifting away from things they supposedly really cared about. Now they no longer do. Ro Khanna was up in Minneapolis, standing in solidarity, out there protesting, and now he's found something else that he can complain about from home. So he's now heading on his way back to California. He doesn't really care much about Don Lemon. He really cares about the Epstein stuff. So now he's going to do his whole shenanigans.
Are being released. I'm going to be looking at whether the appropriate documents were released. What are we looking for? The FBI statements. We need to see whether the 302 forms are being released. That's where the survivors mention who the other rich and powerful men are who abused or raped them. We know from even Maxwell that there are many other men who cut secret deals. Who are these people?
So the testimony that he's referring to from Ghislaine Maxwell that he's referring to here are specific bits of testimony that she gave after she was already indicted and thrown in jail. So like at the stage of I'll say anything that you want me to say kind of stuff. And then also a lot of these 302 forms have already been released. A lot of them have. And by the way, do you know who has the power and the ability to release these names? The victims. The victims have the power and the authority to release a lot of this stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong. Do I think that this stuff should be released? Absolutely, sure. But why are we doing all of this waiting around? If you are a Ro Khanna and you say, we need this stuff that is out there, I know where it is, I see where it is, well, then show it, man. Because at this point, if this is just going to be the thing that just forever, that whenever everything else runs dry, whenever enough Alex Preddy footage comes out that it's no longer useful to talk about him, whenever enough information comes out about fraud in California, oh, you can't really talk about that, or fraud in Minneapolis, you can't talk about that, or the really weird MS-13, tattooed guy, can't talk about that, or all of these other various things that Democrats don't really want to talk about anymore. You're just going to go back to Epstein. There was a lot more to the January 5th accusation or January 6th accusations, and that dried up in the polling really quickly. Already we can tell here, according to every single poll in existence, voters just don't believe that anything here is of any substance at this point. They don't. And by the way, the same for the Clintons in Congress. According to every single poll that we have, just voters don't care. And that's the real secret. Because their comment, said, hey, look, you can get out there and you can talk about anything. Absolutely you can. But it's what people care about that defines the newsworthiness of certain things, especially on the cultural side. And as far as the Epstein case is concerned, a lot of the things have been released. A lot of the stuff is muddy, but a lot of the accusations that were made, when you get out there and you start saying that also the UFOs and the aluminum foil and the Israel and the secret Atlantis, yikes. Relax. You would be far better spent with your time wishing Ernie a happy 93rd birthday. Ernie, over in the comment section, live stream, dude's 93. A legend. And so, yeah, don't waste your time digging through some random crackhead outside of a Papa John's calling in wrong tips. Wish Ernie a happy birthday. Because the man's kicking. You think he made it this far by worrying about nonsense? Absolutely not. So, that said, let's talk about some of the things that maybe you do really find interesting. First of all, California is in some very serious hot water. Dr. Oz, who has taken his TV personalityness and decided, what if I take the investigatory power of the federal government and then I go on site to the particular areas so that you don't have people threatening to beat up Nick Shirley? What if I go out there and I dive in with federal access? And it's been a pretty remarkable success so far. Here's Oz.
I'm here in Los Angeles at the U.S. Attorney's Office. We're talking about fraud. This place has become one of the epicenters for fraud, waste, and abuse in America. $3.5 billion just here in Los Angeles County, we think, around hospice and home health care. Then you add in all the other things like they have in Minnesota, but in California scale, it's huge.
And what we have witnessed is a 7-fold increase in hospice in LA County. 7-fold. That doesn't happen naturally. There are not 7 times more deaths in LA County than there were 5 years ago. These fraudsters, and these do tend to be foreign influences. These are Russian Armenian gangs, mafia, that are leading a lot of these efforts, we believe, have been able to corrupt and work with doctors who are willing to lie, to use that MD degree as a license to kill. A lot of this.
So the claim that Oz is making is that there is a ton of fraud in California that happens to be linked to Russian and Armenian mob groups. Now, this is nothing new. This is something that the federal government of the United States has investigated from many different groups that have been a part of mob entities and organized crime for centuries. This is something that is very, very common and investigated. Absolutely. Foreign influence that goes into different countries and creates organized crime networks. The Chinese do it. At least 5 Central and South American countries do this independently and have admitted to it, and have long since battled with the United States over evading certain notice. So yeah, Russian and Armenian mob, it makes sense. Bring forward some investigatory stuff. Show me the evidence, and I'm very much here for it. Gavin Newsom, he is very, very upset that this is alleged in the first place. It's a really, really weird line to take, because it's not as though there's like some guy named Dimitri in NorCal who's like, this Dr. Oz, he tells me that there is fraud and mob violence, and now people are coming to my yard and they're throwing vodka at my dog. It's very racist. That's not happening. But Gavin Newsom, he's having a rough moment. Again, no one's pay attention to me. So he's got to get out here and do this, but has a little Freudian slip in the middle of it.
Dr. Oz might have be living in Oz when he went down attacking the Armenian community just a few days ago. A business that's down now 30%. Poor guy, small businessman, running a bakery because he decided to do a little TikTok video or something, saying they're somehow connected to the mob around hospice. Well, hospice, we've been after that for years and years before Oz was even on the scene. 2021, we did a moratorium on new hospice program. 280 we shuttered.
So I'm going to put a little asterisk there on shuttering new programs after hospice fraud was discovered, because you have states like Pennsylvania and Minnesota and New York where the Democrat administrations, whether it be under Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania, whether it be under Tim Walz in Minnesota, whether it be under Zoran Mamdani in New York City, Kathy Hochul, governor of New York, that just, there's fraud in these programs? I better give them more money. Gavin Newsom is claiming here that they'd already solved this. They put a moratorium on hospice. We're already on it. Okay. We've talked about the same thing from immigration, and I just want to make this really, really, really clear. In an analogy, as I often use, former teacher, just that's kind of the way that I think. If you have water coming into your house, nasty, dirty, muddy water, ruptured pipe, whatever, it's all over the floor, ruining the carpet, ruining the floors, what have you, the baseboard, drywall, it's seeping up, it's terrible. You cut off the water, and then you go, yay, there's no longer water coming into the house. You do not then go put on your slippers, grab your favorite pipe, a nice tin of Borkum Riff, and sit in your chair and relax away the evening. Because there is still water in your house. In the same way, if you have a problem regarding illegal immigration, if you have a problem regarding massive migrant fraud, just stopping the programs or stopping new programs is not enough, because the people are still here. The people doing the fraud, they're still here. They're still around. They're still doing the fraud. We know because those TikTok videos have been directly linked to participation in the fraud. So instead of crying racism, yes, America's long history of racism towards Armenians, okay.
And after this for years and years and years, we want an open hand, not a closed fist.
I would prefer scissors before rock or paper. Sand the floor before paint the fence. What are you talking? I prefer an open hand before a closed fist. Well, I say, when in doubt, pinky out.
We absolutely are here to be a partner to go after waste, fraud, and abuse. I started something called ODI, Office Digital Innovation. I did not, my mistake, do it with a chainsaw. Had I done that, you would know about it. We just began the Office of Digital Innovation, and we started to begin a process of reforming our procurement and our strategies on technology across the board, but also on the issues of waste, fraud, and abuse. By the way,
so he's getting ready to admit accidentally that there is tons of fraud. But here's the very, very important distinction you need to understand between technocrats. We would call these the establishment, the corporate the corporatists, right? The corporate Democrats, your Hillary Clintons and your Gavin Newsoms. They're the old Democrat, the old guard. They are technocrats. And then you have these on the right as well. These are your moderate, really moderate Republicans. You know them for always saying, don't be hasty, hang on. This is exactly how that manifests. There's a major amount of fraud. There's a major wave of crime. There's a major discrepancy. There's a huge tax issue. There's a huge security issue. And then the moderates, the technocrats, they come in and say, all right, let's form a committee. And then that committee, we're going to soft launch a project with 5 people to begin reporting to 10 other people slowly with second and third checks. We'll go up to from tertiary to quaternary if we have to. And then we'll send that out to a separate group who's going to vet and audit. And it's that kind of thing that never gets anything done. So that's what he's bragging about. We launched the ODI that didn't go in with a chainsaw. Well, because what did Elon Musk do? That's the golden chainsaw joke. He came in and he exposed a lot of fraud in USAID and the program shut down. And Gavin's like, no! Because he doesn't do that. Technocrats on the left and the right believe that let's not be too hasty because this status quo is really nice. And it allows people who are in the middle of committing the fraud to go, wow, the winds be changing, and then shift their strategy and they get away. It turns out that when the FBI kicks in the door at Fulton County in Georgia and says, hey, we're here, give the ballots, you don't have any time to get rid of the ballots. By the way, the same argument to be made if Donald Trump actually would have committed a real crime and refused to cooperate with federal authorities regarding the Mar-a-Lago raid, then a raid would have been appropriate because if there is a suspicion that someone is doing something with the documents or is participating in a kind of fraud or a conspiracy or what have you, then you need law enforcement to surprise. I've never been accused of well, I don't think I've ever told this story. I was in college. I was home for the summer. I had gotten a call from the Newcastle, Indiana Police Department, and they said, we need you to come in right now. We have an officer on his way out to talk to you. That was all the notice I was getting. And I said, why? And they said, we need you to come in and talk to us right now. And I didn't get any other information. And they came out to my house in Henry County, Indiana, my dad's house, actually. And they took me in to the police station in Newcastle, Indiana. And they asked me then and there if I had stolen a school bus from Shenandoah School Corporation near Middletown. Look at me. Do I? No. And then they asked me a bunch of questions. But it was a surprise. I guess I would have maybe hid the school bus somewhere. But if you've ever dealt with law enforcement, you've ever been suspected of anything before, they're not like, hey, in 2 or 3 days, we may show up and ask you a couple questions. And if you could just think about maybe if you're suspected of something, bring in the chainsaw, bring in the hammer. This slow moving nonsense, it leaves a bad taste in the mouths of Americans because this is how nothing ever gets done.
ODI was a partnership with the Health and Human Service to create the new EBD card, which again is leading the nation. I'm humbled in this perspective. No one's denying these issues, but let's also not deny this is purely political.
There we go. It's no one's saying there isn't a ton of fraud, but also it's not political or anything. So after yelling and complaining about Russians and Armenian, they're so mad that the government had a reason to believe that there might be foreign mob activity, Gavin Newsom has now shared that his office is filing a civil rights complaint on Dr. Oz's, quote, baseless and racist accusations and allegations against Armenian Americans in California. Because Dr. Oz is wow, something's really suspicious about this mattress firm that's owned by a guy that looks as though he might be in this mob. Hey, are you a part of the mob? Gavin Newsom's you can't ask that. How could you? That's terrible. I'm just waiting. Gavin Newsom really at this point should just become that really annoying council member that ruins the first half of every Law and Order episode. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Just obnoxious, not helpful whatsoever. And he's going to drive us all into the ground. Other international news, things that are important here. The United States and a pseudo coalition is signaling that it is about time to begin some kind of strike on the Islamic regime in Iran. At this point, according to a couple of leaks from other intelligence services, so the United States is operating in conjunction right now with the Five Eyes. That's us, and then 4 other countries, our intelligence partners, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and we share intelligence with each other. And that has been brought into bear alongside Israel and a couple of Sunni nations in the Middle East regarding a possible strike on Iran. Obviously, the regime, the tens of thousands of protesters that have been brutally slaughtered by those Shia bastards. So, on that particular note, how do we know that the United States is getting ready to move? What actually is the signal that this is about ready to kick off? The ships are in place. There was one thing that a lot of analysts who, let's say, gamble on when these things are about to happen, were waiting for the AWACS flight, essentially a mobile command vessel, to be in the air near the area, essentially to take off from Sicily and start flying towards the eastern edge of the Mediterranean. But British intelligence has essentially leaked that at this point, the United States and Israel are going to strike Iran. The question at this point is not when, it is how much they are going to strike Iran. So at this point, the options on the table are, is it a small targeted strike, or is it also striking ballistic missile sites? Do we hit more nuclear sites? Do we hit every single IRGC, Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps sites? By the way, the European Union has now declared that the IRGC is at the same level of terrorist as ISIS. So interesting, little bit of a development there. Am I going to sit here and, make a big prediction to you that, it's all going to go down this weekend? No. And I've tried to be really, really careful about that kind of speculation. There was a question in the comments that asked, from E. Smith, what about Turkey backing Iran? I have to be very careful because and I'm not trying to tease you guys when I say this. I'm really trying to work out in real time how to be careful. Turkey is a lot more unstable at the governmental level than is often reported. Turkey's undermining of NATO, as it has done consistently, and its weakening of itself by investing as many resources as it has into the Syria and Kurdistani regions, a lot of instability means that the rest of NATO and the rest of the world does not care about Turkey. They can whine and protest all they want. Okay. I mean, essentially the same as Mexico writing an angry letter to the League of Nations is probably all you're going to get. So, good question. Erdogan has made a lot of really dumb decisions because he sees himself as like a Saddam Hussein kind of figure. But Saddam Hussein's biggest problem is he'd make a lot of calculations, but boy, was he bad at math. And Erdogan has done essentially the same thing. Man, started calculating and then forgot he was in radians. And at that point, you're too far into the SAT to suddenly turn around and redo all the math problems. So they're having some issues. Similar issues that China's having. Bad leadership yields bad results. Ask the man in a dress that worked for the Health and Human Services Department in the last administration. So that said and aside, let's get into a little bit of mail time after I share one final thing with you. I'm really thrilled, may I say, at the end of this day, at the end of this week, that of all of the people to get out there and make comments and make really bad decisions, I want to make sure I get this particular clip pulled up here. After all of this, just a crazy week, a lot of us really tired dealing with silliness consistently. Federal agents are still making arrests in the exact same manner they did before Tom Homan was sent in. There was a lot of conversation that people were going to be pulled out and there was going to be a big refocusing and it was going to be a bunch of crossing guard stuff. Now, No.
Get back! 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 Get back!
Why do I share this with you? Why do I show this to you? Because you're seeing three things here that are still consistently a very important thing on any law enforcement officer. Number one, telling people to get back so they do not also get in a situation where they are hurt. Number two, not beating around the bush and dealing with a lot of like introductories, saying, hey there, pal, you probably need to get back. No, get back, explicative, get back, in the manner that they are arresting individuals. They are no longer kind of doing the throw on the ground and then deal with it approach. It is very, very targeted regarding like the wrenching of the limbs, immobilization. There are now very definitive weapon sweeps and searches on the body and very clear communication between law enforcement. That is a very good thing. If there is one thing that is getting a little bit sharper right now in the country, if there is one thing that is getting a little bit more intentional, it is how federal law enforcement carries out its actions. And in the next couple of months, that is going to be extremely, extremely important. The other thing I wanted to show you before we get to mail time is that it's not just journalists that you've heard of that are really upset about Don Lemon. Random journalists for random networks and things that I've never heard of are also upset. I didn't get to play this for you during the show, and bonus tonus, sometimes we get to play a little something we never got to.
Pardon me if this is new to me, because normally I'm on that side of the camera. But today, I and many of my colleagues are called to be on this side of the camera. And it is one of the scariest moments of my life and in my career to know that a fellow journalist, a top journalist, an award-winning journalist, a 3-time Emmy award-winning journalist, the only journalist who was in the courtroom during the Derek Chauvin trial. So she's a vetted journalist whose credentials are impeccable.
That's not what any of that means at all. Not at all. Not even remotely close. None of the adjectives that you used there were appropriate.
Is right now sitting in federal custody.
Awesome.
For doing her duty.
No. Again, absolutely not. And the reason I shared that is because the consistent case being made is that no one had any idea when they were on their way there. According to the newly unsealed indictment against Don Lemon, he thanked the church's storming mob's alleged ringleader, that being Levy Armstrong, quote, for what she was doing and assured her that he would keep the protest plans a secret, end quote. Well, very fun stuff. So there have been a lot of excellent things the Trump administration has also accomplished this week. We're going to talk about that a little bit here. Let's do just a smidgen, just a hint of mail time. So mail time, just here at the end of this lovely long week here. You just throw a question into the live chat there on Rumble or YouTube, or you can head over to TonyKinnett.com, and there's a little contact link there where you can send us some stuff on that side of things. So, you know, every show's got to have a little mail, a little viewer engagement, little back and forth kind of a thing. So we'll do a little of that here before our fantastic weekend arrives. First and foremost, this is from a dear friend over in financial analysis. His name is Tom. He says that, can a random person, like say a church parishioner, sue a journalist who participates in a FACE Act violation? For example, Don Lemon, for causing emotional pain and suffering. Can a bunch of them each do that separately so that Lemon has to answer each complaint separately, adding to more billable hours for his attorneys? So the short answer to that is probably not for Don Lemon. Now, for the individual who was directly harassing and intimidating and preventing people from getting out of the row, the guy in the large beard who apparently I had met at one point or another, that was like screaming really inappropriate stuff at children, and then when they cried, he got mad at them from crying and screamed at him some more. Yeah, that family could sue him because there are definitive damages that are able to be articulated in court. The whole point of suing, although there are a lot of convoluted ways you can argue damages occurred these days, you have to prove that you are out something. And just saying that like you feel bad, it's even though that may be true, saying, I'm going to sue you for a FACE Act violation, probably not. City's Church doesn't really have to ask the federal government to press charges for the federal government to press charges here. So probably not. And then also the stacking of court things. So unless the family directly interacted with Don Lemon, who it's pretty well established is not one of the ringleaders, he may have participated and encouraged what was going on. But unless you, that would be a really hard one to argue. And then like stacking his lawyer up forever with just like legal infinitum, you still have to have a singular judge that's going to look over that. And that judge is likely going to shuffle those things together and ask for it to return as a class, unless very specific instances can be decided. Now, if Don threw a punch toward one and a kick towards another, and then that kind of a thing, yeah, then you would be able to. And then again, you're looking at different kind of ways that those laws are dealt with. So the unfortunate thing is probably not. A lot of it does have to do with how the FACE Act and the Ku Klux Klan Act is also interpreted. So previously, probably not. So that aside, next question that I thought was it. So are you not disappointed that Don Lemon was released on no bail back into the public? Okay, I do have an answer on that one. Right now, according to prior FACE Act indictments, grand jury and otherwise, there is not a precedent currently on the books that says that somebody charged with certain, like they have to be thrown in confinement for a while and then like wait for their day on trial. I believe that in early February is when Don's first hearing is in this particular instance. If they did insist on him being a danger to himself and others, like he can't really destroy anything now. He can't really jeopardize the case. If he gets out there and talks right now, because he's already on video saying very different things, he's going to ruin himself. So the Trump administration saying, yeah, or recommending, yeah, we don't think he's a danger, let him out until his hearing date, is going to do a lot to undermine it's like the Nazis, they're going after the journalist. Because like if Don Lemon actually was terrified, he can find a way to flee the country. Now that again would be evading arrest, but if he really feared, really, really fears, he could do that. He's not gonna. So by releasing him, the Trump administration's going, you're not gonna do anything. All of this stuff is nonsense. And all of those people on tape saying, oh, the end is here, Nazis are here, we're all gonna die, even though I'm complaining about it. Nah, I'm personally not as upset at this. From Cliff Victoria, Tony, those of us watching know the people in the videos are lying, bad, or both. I'd like to see some positive coverage of what Republicans are doing. I hear you. I do. There were a couple of things this week particularly that I thought were stellar. So going from least great to most great. First and foremost, the president announcing that he'd signed an executive order to do an IndyCar race in Washington, D.C. is awesome. And may I say, that should have been done ages ago. That's freaking, I'm not even a racing fan at all. I'm not an IndyCar fan. I'm not a NASCAR fan. I saw the Indy 500 for the first time recently, like in person. It was really cool. I'm not a huge racing fan. Not because I think it's wrong. I love it. I mean, not because it doesn't interest me. It was just, you grow up with different things. But I will absolutely travel to watch the Freedom 500 or whatever race the president said. So that's something I really like. Second most, this thing that I think is probably the second best right now, the Trump accounts for children is incredible. Love it, love it, love it. I think that is truly an amazing thing. Obviously, to get businesses and organizations to fund Roth IRA style, but investment accounts that are linked to Wall Street for children, to get away from this awful Social Security system that is the worst, is incredible. I do find it rather ironic and hilarious that the president of the United States is essentially doing what George Bush said we should do. Because George W. said, hey, let's stop relying on Social Security, which sucks, and instead make it a stock market portfolio that people can put money into without us reaching in and taking money out of their pockets. And the media said, oh, that's terrible. How dare you take away people's Social Security? And it's like, well, it's going to run out of money eventually anyway because it's a Ponzi scheme. It is. Sorry. It's the fact. And as far as Social Security is concerned, we do need to move away from it for future generations. Now, look, if you're on Social Security or you've paid into it your entire life, you know, Gen X up to the phenomenal baby boomer generation, you guys want to keep your Social Security, awesome. I'm for funding it through the rest of your life. But right now, though I be the last of the millennials who has paid into it all of my life so far, all of my very short 30 years, I would be willing to throw that away if instead of Social Security, I got to take the Social Security tax and throw it into the stock market instead. Absolutely, I would. Because the Ponzi scheme right now is awful. So that's my hot take there. Amazing work from the Trump administration. I'm also thrilled to be in Indiana. And I can't remember off the top of my head. Please forgive me. This is 100% an admission of fault because you asked me to cover Republican good news this week. Here I am not knowing the name. There's a donor in Indiana who has agreed to donate to children here in Indiana. And my kids are already, born. And were born by the time Trump took office. So they're not eligible for like the next roll-in. So that there are Indiana donors that are swooping in to donate for Indiana kids. I think that is fantastic. I'm thrilled. I'm very, very grateful. I will absolutely be sending a thank you card to that particular donor. One of the comments, 30. Yeah, I'm only 30. Or yeah, I am already 30, whichever you prefer. I was born in June of 1995. So I'm so sorry if I have disappointed all of you and you thought that I was some wizened man in the prime of his life. And I was like riding a nice 46 Stellar. But no, I'm sorry. I am but a wee lad still. That particular thing aside, that's my second favorite thing for the Trump administration this particular week. First and foremost, I am extremely, extremely happy to see the federal, the next guy that is very likely to be the Federal Reserve chairman, it being Kevin Warsh. I'm thrilled to see Kevin Warsh be the guy. If it was going to be Kevin Hassett, I was going to be a very grumpy guy because Kevin Hassett is the definition of a yes man. And he'll look at you. And again, I've met Kevin. Nice guy. Really nice guy. But when something is going wrong and something may not be working correctly, and it may not even be your fault, but something's not working correctly, if you go talk to Scott Besson about it, he'll say, well, clearly it's not working, but it's going to. And if you ask Kevin Hassett about it, Kevin will give you this big grin and go, everything's wonderful and everything's fine. And I don't like that. I don't care for that. So Kevin Warsh is a much, much better choice. The man is a brilliant economist. He's very growth focused. And he has my personal opinion on, people are really upset that I said how old I am. And we have this, Kevin Warsh and I have the same opinion on inflation, which is that government printing money, bad. Inflation go up when government print money. Print money, not good. So I like that. I do. I find that good. So I'm looking forward to the tenure of Kevin Warsh. That's an excellent pick. Oftentimes, again, Trump will pick somebody like a Marco Rubio and stellar, and everyone's kind of skeptical, and he turns out to be great. And sometimes you have a Scott Besson, who everyone's like, yeah, he's going to be great, and he's also great. And then sometimes you have people that's like, yeah, it's going to be good, and it's Kristi Noem, and it's like, you don't want that. Kevin Warsh if it would have been Kevin Hassett, been like, okay. Warsh, awesome. Yes, stellar, super duper duper. So that's my personal take there. Thank you very much to Carol Hutch for the $10 super chat. It's very, very kind of you. Dave asks, I think we're probably going to cut it short after that. I've disappointed y'all far too much this evening. Dave, 3156, question for Tony if he does them at the end. How close does he think we are to having the Insurrection Act invoked? Great question. Here's my answer to you. If we begin to see vigilante violence reach the murder point, and I don't necessarily mean after the death of Alex Preddy, there was an individual who bit off the tip of the finger of a federal law enforcement officer. They weren't able to put it back on. And I thought that is a very serious issue. There was another news event that happened about 5 minutes later that didn't get any coverage of an individual reportedly throwing a chunk of concrete at a federal law enforcement officer, and it missed. If there is a federal law enforcement officer who is killed by one of these left-wing get out there and everything's First Amendment if you have your phone kind of agitators and instigators, if there is an innocent person, which this is actually my real concern right now. I don't mean as I'm not concerned about law enforcement being hurt. Obviously, I'm very concerned. But they have their head on a swivel already. If you're in Minneapolis right now and you're driving an SUV and there's some blonde Botoxed moron who doesn't have family and things to care about, like a lot of ladies as they age on the right do, that make them so wonderful. But if you're like a very angry left-leaning gal who has nothing but screaming at your car as you drive down the interstate, like the video we played yesterday, and you see just a person in an SUV, it may be you, and you don't see her suddenly chase you around, and she tries to like do a pit maneuver on you because she thinks this is the time you're going to hurt somebody. Maybe she's like, oh, this is on the way to that Mexican restaurant. I gotta stop him. And she like rear ends you and causes you to get in a car accident and therefore die. That is an act of this kind of vigilantism that I am deeply concerned about seeing, because no one out there on the left side of the aisle has said don't do this, except Fetterman. No one at all. Right now, it is this justification that, oh, well, because 2 people died, you get to act however you want. And it is the equivalent of the media posting a picture of a crying child and going, look, it's a crying child, burn the Constitution. No, this will end when vigilante justice, again, air quotes, is carried out, and that turns into your first big running into businesses that don't have anything to do with anything kind of riots. That will be Insurrection Act time. I actually think you're probably more likely to see federal officers. Well, I think you're more likely to see Tim Walz arrested first than you are the Insurrection Act invoked and the National Guard of Minnesota federalized. So that's just my particular take there. So yeah, because they don't want administration law enforced. Yeah, and also, are the people mad or are they paid? I'm glad you asked this question. This will actually be my last question. I've been meaning to talk about this for a while. I am deeply bothered and annoyed by the tendency on the right to look at any event, and go, that's fake. They paid for that. Those are paid people at these protests. Those are all paid people. And the reason I know they're all paid for is because there's this one person on camera who said, hey, I was paid to be here. A moment, if you will. First and foremost, yes, there are a lot of cases where people are paying for people to be certain areas at protests as instigators, leaders, and agitators. People paying those to set up those little workshops where they teach the chants with the clapping. However, the vast majority of people showing up to these protests and these riots are not paid. They truly, deeply, religiously believe it. And if you brush aside this was my biggest issue when Charlie Kirk was assassinated with people in the response from it. There are those right now that are openly, gleefully telling you they are happy to kill you and see you dead, see your family traumatized. You see it on camera. They're happy to tell you. And there are people who said, no, it can't be. They have to be, it's all astroturfed, or, oh no, actually it's a foreign government doing it. And again, there can be foreign government involvement in things. We saw this with this protest on Friday, today. There was a Chinese-linked group that threw money into this for some organization, leadership, and propaganda. The vast majority of the people there, though, are religious adherents to it. They believe it. They believe it. I get questions about this all the time as a broadcaster. And people angry in my direct messages are like, who's paying you to grift like this? Who's paying you to do this? You're getting Russian money. Well, I'm not allowed in Russia. I'm currently banned from the country, so probably not. Oh, you're getting foreign dollars from here, or you're getting this extra money, whatever. I'm going to let you in on a little bit of a secret. The reason I'm doing this is because I believe it. Yeah, I'm conservative. I'm a conservative, independent, fundamental Baptist, and a Hoosier. Sorry, it's me. That's the reason you guys don't catch me in lies. All of me that's here is just here. It's what I believe. It's what I am. And a lot of you, I'd say the 99 percentile of you watching this, the reasons that you are commenting what you're commenting is you really believe it. No, don't get me wrong. You can troll and, get people, to say things that are mad because that's funny. That's a different kind of a thing. But when it comes to some of these protests, the reason that I make yes, I am banned from Russia. It's a long story. I'm also banned from access into China as well. Absolutely. Yes. The reason I bring this up is not to browbeat you, but there is a thorn in my side whenever I see the protest images today and like the top several comments are, oh, they're all paid to be there. No, they religiously believe that they have to be out there to stop the Nazis. And if you discount that if they weren't paid, none of those people would show up. Guys, Minneapolis burnt down because people did it, not because they were paid to. People riot in New York City because they want to. Yeah, no, get me wrong. Yeah, the leadership is paid. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Do not discount those who make it rather clear what they are willing to do to you and against you. Again, as I said, we didn't get to play the rest of her clip. Maybe now is probably the good time to. But when Kathy Griffin gets out there and says, make a list of people, make America great again, whatever, make a list of them, she ain't lying.
Those of you that are in real life, it's time to talk to your neighbors, find out if they're MAGA or not. Sorry, but we have to know who's on our team and start to plan. Is there a way we can do something as a community?
There you go. To one of the comments, Jago de Basic, he sent $2.99 in Australian dollars, otherwise known as dollar bucks, to you bluey people out there. He said, "Here are some foreign dollars." Thank you. And from this dear Hoosier, Hugh Jackman and good day. So with that, I always forget we are kind of a morning show for Australians, and that tickles me to no end. But alas, I'm starting to ramble because, it's me. So I'll see you on Monday. It's the Tony Kinnett cast. Obviously, if we strike Iran, we'll go live if I'm not, dead to the world asleep. Don't know when that's going to be. So, hey, Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, first on 93 WIBC. Take care.
Since the founding of America 250 years ago, many things have changed. The homes in which we live, the clothes we wear, the jobs we hold, the conveniences we enjoy. But some things never change. The commitment of husband and wife, the importance of passing along our values to our children, the rewards of service to community and country, the faithfulness of God. Some wonder how America has thrived for so long and how we can ensure she continues to. As long as we keep first things first, we've only just begun. America, the beautiful.